Much in life revolves around distance. You are limited by what places you can reach within a certain amount of time. I'm sure New Zealand would get a lot more visitors if it wasn't so forsaken far away from most people in the world. And I'm sure New Zealanders would visit New York more often if it didn't have the audacity of demanding a 20+ hour flight from them. But distance is relative. Speed is breaking down distance, making impossible gaps seem much closer. But for speed you need technology, and you most often need money. Walking doesn't demand much, but reaching faraway places on foot just isn't feasible if you must be home to feed the cat before sunset. For much of human history, animals could help us. Horses, not the least, bent distance for generations of humans. Then along came the train. I can imagine it felt like distance was about to snap at the angle trains pushed it into, when people first were able to travel by rail across nations or even continents. But since people are individualistic and refuse to go to the same place at publicly scheduled times, we invented the bicycle, the motorbike, and the car, and lots of roads for them to run on. And with planes, suddenly we could reach the other side of the world in just a day. Distance was forever tamed by humans, and we would never let it run free again. I think I forgot to mention boats in there somewhere, but it's not important for the story. And this is about Earth, so let's not get into distances in space here. This is a story mainly about the United States. All other nations on Earth have also seen similar development, but leave it to the Americans to grab position of protagonist. The suburban life was never a self-supporting form of living. It was developed as a mirror to the existing cities. Cities were dense and dirty and mixed. Social problems were prominent for everyone living in the city, no matter your level of wealth. Modernism, as we have mentioned in the previous video, took up to solve this by separating people of different income and race with zoning laws and with the first gentrification process that pushed the poorest away. But suburbs developed, starting after World War I and intensifying after World War II as a result of the democratization of car ownership. Owning a car brought on a whole range of opportunities for families and an individualistic lifestyle. And the modernist architects and city planners put it front and center of all demolition and construction plans. The American suburb that evolved around the car is in a way iconic today. Its wide streets were supposed to combat congestion and make room for delivery trucks, fire trucks and similar. Even that cleaning up after a possible nuclear attack would be easier was used as a reason for constructing wide streets. The houses were moved further apart, became bigger, and had lawns in front of them, with the classic porch moved to the back. The sidewalks were few and narrow, and zoning made sure no stores or public places could be established. The only public transport that became ubiquitous was the school bus. And this wasn't just an unforeseen consequence of the outstretched suburbs. It was definitely by design. Many of the leading planners who oversaw this development actively disliked public transportation and would only incorporate it into their plans when they were actively forced to. Instead, the highway system was the great infrastructure product to go hand in hand with suburbanization. At higher speeds, more distance could be covered in an acceptable amount of time. The houses looked very similar, and the streets looked very similar. Houses were started to be mass-produced to cut costs. And being a time before civil rights, many neighborhoods not only excluded blacks and other minorities just by being expensive, but by only allowing white residents no matter what. The so-called white flight from cities was made possible also by a change in mortgages. Loans were extended to last for longer periods, and required down payments were lowered. Veterans got housing subsidies after World War II. The ethnic separation that occurred, or at least was highly exaggerated with suburbia, is still today highly prevalent, and while not enforced as blatantly anymore, was certainly preserved by zoning laws and economic requirements for settlement. Suburbs do not offer the same access to anonymity as cities do, and can therefore be difficult places to show any deviation from the norm. This can be especially hard for minorities or LGBTQ people. The car changed people's perspective on distance, but by doing so, it pushed people further apart. The distance between houses increased, the distance to the other side of the street was exaggerated by wide streets with cars traveling at high speeds, a lack of sidewalks and pedestrian crossings. All this meant a greater need for building materials for bigger houses, for asphalt and cement, and cables and pipes to connect all houses, for gasoline to travel the distances, and for everyone to buy their own copy of every household object, instead of borrowing from each other. The growth of suburban living was heaven for commercial interests and capitalism. But the results for people and the environment was, to be generous, more mixed. With the early suburbs, people mostly shopped in the cities they worked in and commuted to. But later, commercial zoning was available also outside the cities. Here, malls were great to travel to by car and walk around on foot while there. And later, they were taken over by big box stores that won by offering lower prices. Now, commercial areas were just huge concrete boxes with massive signs and a vast parking lot. Frank Lloyd Wright said in 1930s, "Cities are about to die. New tech is lessening the need for cultural institutions, and changes in transportation will decrease the need for closeness." And at the peak of suburbanization, I bet it felt like he was about to be right. The cities remaining after the middle class left were in deep crisis, crime-ridden and with bleak visions of the future. But as we know since then, much has turned around for the cities, even in the US. Even though that development, with a significant portion of gentrification that has taken place, has been associated with social issues that we will go into more in a later video, there is no doubt that most cities have been resurrected and came out stronger. And the suburbs have a great problem that has been exacerbated in the last few decades. The average New Yorker emits just around a third of the greenhouse gases of the average American. The large cars driving great distances, the green lawns, and the extravagant lifestyle of the middle class in suburban areas mean that they are highly unsustainable in a time where high-density cities are winning when it comes to reducing emissions. The rest of the world has not seen suburban living in the same way as Americans, but the tendencies is present in many other places. While the cities of Europe weren't hit as hard with the flight of the middle class, the older city centers remained associated with high land value and wealthy tenants. But around them, they too are surrounded by at least some American-style suburbs. In middle and low-income nations, exaggerated Los Angeles-style gated communities with high fences and large estates have been established in societies where the level of inequality makes the US look like communist heaven. But the extremely car-centric approach that was established in the US is hard to find in other places. But the vision and class structures using suburbs sure do exist elsewhere. In Europe, they manifest themselves more in two different types of suburbs. Some of them the American-style affluent suburbs, and some of them with high-rise buildings and much less affluent inhabitants. Migrants and minorities live to a much higher extent in the latter, that might be more similar to poor inner city areas in the United States. In Europe, public transportation is much more prevalent in both rich and poor suburbs. Another form of areas on the outskirts of cities are slums, the subject for a separate video. It is probably unlikely that suburbs will go away anytime soon. After all, it brought about some good development for the people who moved there. And many would argue that is a lifestyle they want to keep, or to achieve. Instead, we probably must look into how we can make even a less dense living sustainable. Suburban living is, after all, in many ways the equivalent of freedom, and that is difficult to take away from people. The car has been a magnificent invention for reducing the importance of distance as a limiting factor for humans. We have all been able to live completely different lives and make so many decisions and see so much more as a result of the car. And I'm not sure that is something I would want to take away from someone. But on the other hand, cars also just suck. A heavily trafficked street in a city is loud, dangerous, and anything but pleasurable to look at. I believe suburbs can work, for humans and for the environment. But we fail when we think distance is something to overcome. It is all about making distance manageable. Some rarer things might only be accessible by car, or possibly by public transportation. But there should be things accessible by bike, or by foot as well. Heck, I might even say that the journey should be the destination, but let's not get overly pompous here. And privacy and self-dependence is nice and all at times, but it is certainly not a way to design a society. Humans have successfully fought distance before, and won. And we can do it again. Only this time we need to bridge the distance between people and their houses, and between houses and the supermarket and the pharmacy. Thank you for watching.
It's hard when you ain't got nobody. It's hard when nowhere feels like home. It's hard when the world has gone crazy. Seems just like everything needs